everyone. I'm Tamara Banks, and welcome to Denver Decides. Denver Decides is a community partnership dedicated to accessible and transparent elections. The partnership includes the League of Women Voters of Denver, Interneighborhood Cooperation, Historic Denver, and is presented by Denver 8 TV. Today, we are presenting a candidate forum in anticipation of the municipal election coming up on Tuesday, May 7th. Among other offices, this election includes the candidates vying to represent District 5 as a member of Denver City Council. District 5 is located in East Central Denver. Our format is a pretty standard one. The candidates will have timed opening and closing statements. The opening statements will be followed by rounds of questions that have been submitted by the organizers of the forum and possibly from you in the audience. Since we do have a time limit, we may not be able to get to all of the submitted questions. All of the candidates will answer all of the questions, and all of their responses will be timed. Our timers are out front where our candidates can see them clearly. So let's begin by meeting the candidates vying to represent District 5 as your next City Council member. The candidates are seated left to right, facing the audience in the order that their names will appear on the May ballot. So let's hold our applause until I'm finished introducing everyone. Beginning at my right is Michelle Fry. Seated next to her is Steve Riplin. On my left is Amanda Sawyer. And seated next to her is Mary Beth Sussman. Let's give all of our candidates a big round of applause. We'll begin with 1-minute opening statements from each of the 4 candidates. We'll proceed in ballot order with these statements, so once again, starting at my right. An opening statement from Michelle Fry. And Michelle, you've got 1 minute.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Fry, and I'm a candidate for City Council in District 5. I have spent my life in District 5. I am born and raised. I have been there for 47 years, so you now know how old I am. My family, my mother grew up there. I was raised by a single mother, and so it was good that the rest of my family, my grandparents, my great-grandparents were around me to raise me. I have been there since day one. I have seen the changes and the growth and the difficulties that our neighborhoods and our communities are facing. I have seen the difficulties in the separations in neighborhoods, the frustration with development, the frustration with not being heard. I am running to bring transparency and accountability back to the people and back to city government. I feel we have lost our way. Taxpayers deserve to know how their taxpayer dollars are being spent. We are not seeing that in development. We are not seeing that in the tax increases. We're not seeing the tax increases that go to parks, but the park in Montclair looks like it's been abandoned. I'm Michelle Fry, and I'm running for City Council, and I ask for your vote May 7th. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now let's hear from Steve Riplin.
Good evening. My name is Steve Replin, and I also have lived in District 5 my entire life, possibly a year longer than 43 years. Anyway.
God, you made me young. Thank you.
Oh, my goodness, of course. I've spent my entire working life as a lawyer, a CPA, and a business coach, identifying problems for my clients and finding solutions to each of them. The problems in our district are totally obvious. Everybody talks about traffic. Everybody talks about more density and more crime. But who really has suggested viable solutions to any of these problems? Certainly, the current City Council hasn't come up with a lot that seems to stick. Do you realize that between 9th and Colorado Boulevard, with its 1,200 new apartments and the development on 1st and Quebec, with 347 new apartments, we have the possibility of adding 25,000 new car trips to District 5. I ask for your vote on May 7th because as a member of Denver City Council, I promise you that.
Thank you. And now an opening statement from Amanda Sawyer.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming. I'm Amanda Sawyer, and I'm a candidate for Denver City Council in District 5. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the one with the purple hair, which I always tell people says I might drive a minivan, but I still have my soul. I am running to bring long-term strategic thinking back to City Council. You can see it in the issues that are all around us, and my 3 things that I really want to focus on in my campaign are, number 1, bringing the voice of the community back to the process, which is something that's missing right now. The second is focusing on crime and safety, whether that's an allocation of resources or whether there's something more we need to do. We need to make sure we're giving the people who work in our city the tools they need to be successful and to keep us safe. And the third is infrastructure, mobility and public transit, because we need a dedicated source of funding for those things so that we can get around our city with the number of people that are expected to move here. I've got 3 little girls in DPS, and I want my kids to love Denver and grow up in a fantastic place, and that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mary Beth Sussman.
Thank you very much. I'm Mary Beth Sussman, running for re-election in District 5. I think the future of our city is built on 3 basic principles: ensuring residents from all economic backgrounds have an opportunity to live around our city, providing equitable transit so we can get out of our car, and convenient transit so we can get out of our cars some of the time, walk around and bike in safety and feel good about that, have walkable communities. And we need to create new small businesses and affordable housing options in dense areas by working with communities to create sustainable solutions for the future. I too have lived in the neighborhood for 47 years, and I wasn't born here. So I have seen a lot. I worked hard on creating Lowry. I worked hard on many neighborhood associations and groups. I love taking care of my city, and I ask for your vote.
All right, thank you. And now it's time for our questions, our first round of questions, and we'll reverse the order and begin with Mary Beth Sussman. The first question is, some say the residents of District 5 have a reputation for fighting development more furiously than other neighborhoods and accepting fewer new homes than other areas closer to downtown. Do you agree or disagree? And please explain.
Well, I think that there's been so much change in our city. I've never seen it grow as fast as this. And change is difficult. And we have neighborhoods that have been very stable for a very long time. And so the change, I think, it gives people pause. And there are people, our neighborhoods have people that have lived there a very long time. We don't have a very transient neighborhood. So I think it's understandable when folks feel a little nervous about it. But certainly they have accepted some major changes in the neighborhood. For example, at Lowry, that was a major change that came to the neighborhood. And then 9th and Colorado, when the University of Colorado left, and suddenly we have a brand new development, which University of Colorado used to have 30,000 cars a day. But we won't have that many cars with the new 9th and Colorado. And then the expansion of Lowry, the first Boulevard 1. We had never planned on that closing. And so it's been a lot for the neighborhood to sort of take in, but I think that they are, I think that they are being very thoughtful.
Time. Thank you. Amanda, same question.
Well, thanks so much. I actually have been on the forefront in the trenches with the neighbors and working to bring the voice of the people back to our community when it comes to development. We find ourselves in a situation where, Denver has to continue to grow because we need the housing. But at the same time, the people who live in our neighborhoods are tired. They're tired of being ignored. They're tired of having their voices not heard. And we need to do a better job of collaborating with the people who live in our neighborhoods and the developers who are coming in and wanting to really change things. And the second problem is that we also don't have any infrastructure being put in place to support this kind of development. Without that infrastructure, the traffic gets worse, our quality of life is diminished, and those are the reasons why I'm running for city council, because we need a pragmatic approach and some answers to those kinds of things. It's not about YIMBY and NIMBY, it's about thoughtful development that works for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve.
I think much of the development that's occurred in our district especially is what I call ready, fire, aim. There's an open piece of ground. Why don't we put some density there? But wait, what about the impact on traffic? And what about the impact on crime and the impact on our school system and our children? So there is a fight amongst the developers to develop everything that's vacant. And yet our community, especially in District 5, and as you go Hilltop, Crestmore, and Lowry, and surrounds, is a very stable group of folks. I grew up at 375 Elm Street, and I can tell you that no one ever left the neighborhood. It was so stable. Same as Crestmore Downs, which is where I live now. And those people, the average tenure there was 15, 20 years. So you've got a bunch of folks who are old-time people who live there, who are used to a lifestyle. Developers come in with no real ties to our district, only for greed.
Thank you.
Can I have the question one more time?
Of course. The question is, some say the residents of District 5 have a reputation for fighting development more furiously than other neighborhoods and accepting fewer new homes than other areas closer to downtown. Do you agree or disagree? And please explain your answer.
So I do agree. The issue in District 5 is that we had a lot of land in Lowry with the annex shutting down. That was more development. But as I'm talking to people, as I have talked to people over the years, people are upset about not being heard. People don't feel like they're part of the process. The neighbors feel like that no matter going to the meetings, they still give their input and they still aren't heard. The Lowry redevelopment, or not redevelopment, but development on Uinta Boulevard, Academy Boulevard, and over by Big Bear in that area, 18 buildings, at least 3 high, 3 deep. We don't hear about that. That's going to do a lot to the traffic. There's no infrastructure there. People did fight against that, but we heard a lot about green flats that actually would have made home ownership and was going to be a zero green emissions project. And home ownership gives buy-in to the community.
All right, thank you. And we'll begin with the next round of questions. Amanda, we'll start with you this time. The question is, will you vote for or against initiated Ordinance 300, also known as the Right to Survive? And please explain.
I do not support Initiative 300. As awful as it seems, as it feels to not support it, because no one wants to vote against the right to survive, right? But it's not the answer. This is a supposed simple solution to something that is not going to have easy answers. And so we need to look at lowering the barriers to entry into our shelter system so that we can actually house our homeless people. We need to look at building affordable housing that works for people in the 0 to 30% AMI area so that homeless people can be housed. Initiative 300, as much as I want it to be the answer, simply isn't.
All right. Steve, you're next.
I'm against Proposition 300 as well. It appears to me as though it would be like putting a neon sign up around the country to invite homeless people to move to colorful Colorado, where the living is free and easy, stay in any park, any public parkway, and it's free and you won't be hassled by the police. I think it's an emotional issue because nobody wants to be against homeless people, but it's also a practical issue as well. Who wants to have homeless people living in their front lawn, on Alameda Parkway, on Monaco, on 17th Avenue Parkway? So there needs to be a better solution for it. And letting people live anywhere and everywhere at any time is not the right solution.
Thank you, Michelle.
So Initiative 300's language is not perfect. It's far from perfect. But they worked really hard to have it on the ballot, just like Let Denver Vote. And they need to have their voices heard. They're part of the community as well. I've worked on this issue. I'm the chief of staff for a state representative at the city or at the State House. So I've worked on right to rest. I know what this is born of. And the issue ultimately is the camping ban. And we need to work on that and fix it, because right now we have set up Denver City Council and the City of Denver to be sued. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled that ticketing unhoused people is a violation under the Eighth Amendment, and it's cruel and unusual punishment. That is why Initiative 300 is born. And I live with people in my alley, on my front porch, passed out drunk every single day, and nothing is done about it. So this Initiative 300 is nothing new to me because we live with it every day.
Thank you. Mary Beth?
I'm opposed to 300. it doesn't solve our homeless problem. I know that the proponents are very passionate about the problem with homelessness, and we need to build homes, and we do have in Denver what's called a Housing First policy, and we are building thousands of homes, with finding funds to help that happen. We need to put homeless people in homes so they can establish some stability and then wrap them around with services, mental health services, drug addiction services, job training. But 300 doesn't do anything like that. It has no solutions for homelessness.
All right, thank you. Our next round of questions, and we'll begin with Steve this time. The question is, where do you stand on the proposed Colfax Bus Rapid Transit that will bring bus-only lanes, rapid transit-like stations, and pedestrian improvements to East Colfax?
I'm really nervous about the plan because the commercial businesses that are on both sides of Colfax hang on barely. It's not really meant to be a retail street. Retail requires adequate parking and visibility on a street. Anything that disturbs that delicate balance is enough to throw a small businessman or businesswoman into bankruptcy. So parking is already a problem along Colfax, and people spill off into the neighborhoods and they park there. So when the redevelopment of East Colfax is really fully underway, I want to make sure that that redevelopment does not cause prices to increase, property values to increase, and hence a lack of ability of small business people to afford the very spaces that they rent. We could easily end up with a completely vacant retail street if we're not careful. So.
All right, thank you. Michelle?
So I think the BRT is a good idea. I'm very concerned. My mother lives right there on Colfax and Monaco on Monaco Parkway. We had a survey pin put behind her garage with bright red, pink neon lines going out into the middle of the street. I'm concerned if property is going to be eminent domained. I'm concerned about the overflow into the alley. I'm concerned about how we'll get to her house. I'm concerned about the parking. I'm concerned about a lot of the mobility on there. However, I ride the 15 to the Capitol, and there needs to be an improvement. So I'm apprehensive with hope for a positive outcome, and we stay very involved in that so that the businesses that I frequented my whole life, where my brother worked at True Value, the Elm that is now the Hamburger Bar, where my mom went and had floats at the soda shop. I'm concerned about keeping the character as well.
All right, thank you. Mary Beth?
I'm very much in support of the BRT. It's going to run up the middle of the street, which is exactly where the trolley used to run, because they have found it's safer for pedestrians to run in the middle of the street. They're going to have medians. They're going to have buses, much like the mall buses, where you step on. You pay before you get on. The buses open up. There's about 25,000 riders on Colfax now. They expect 25,000 more. And of course, the bus system now has headways that are almost one right after another during rush hour. They can't take on any more passengers, and they need to create some kind of rapid, convenient, inexpensive transit up Colfax. I just hope that we can get Aurora to also buy in, because Aurora has not decided to buy into the BRT. But I think it is a major solution to what the increase in population that we're going to have and the increase in riders that we're going to have in the city. And I think it's going to help the businesses. I'm very.
That pink stop sign went up. Thank you. Amanda?
I think that the BRT coming on Colfax is an absolutely fantastic opportunity, but I think it needs to be managed properly. And that is where my concern lies, because what it's going to do is it's going to push traffic onto 13th and 14th. And we need to do something about, we know that's going to happen, so let's do something about it now before it gets to be a problem. It's going to bring more commuters to the area, but right now there's no real north-south street that is safe for people who live south to get north to Colfax to enjoy that area. So there are some realistic solution discussions that need to happen here because it is a fantastic opportunity for us to grow the city of Denver. And we need to take advantage of that, but we need to be smart about it. And my fear is that if it's not managed properly, it will be a mess. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Another question for our candidates running for District 5. And we'll begin with Michelle this time. And this question is transit related as well. When it comes to transit issues, some have referred to District 5 as a donut hole, meaning there is no first or last mile to get people from major routes to their homes. Do you agree? And if so, what would you propose as a solution?
So I do agree. I've spoken with a lot of neighbors that used to take the 10, that may go out to Anschutz to work, that would ride their bike, but then they can't get home because it stops at 7 p.m. So we have a definite first and last mile issue. RTD is a public-private partnership. RTD is exerting their private part of the partnership, but we don't see a whole lot of work and backing push between the public portion, which is our taxpayer dollars. I will revert back to taxpayer dollars always. 65 runs, the 15 runs, but you try to go anywhere else in the district and get anywhere else in the city, and it is a transit desert. So I think we really need to work with RTD and find some workable solutions to see what we can do to increase run times, to increase more on time, more than just 30 minutes, more than having a bus on the 15 right back to back when one was supposed to be there 5 minutes prior.
All right, thank you. Mary Beth?
This is a topic near and dear to my heart. I think I was the first to call it a donut hole of transit. The light rail is a wonderful thing, but it doesn't go anywhere we want to go in the middle of the city. We move about 4 miles from our house every day. I think what we need to do is bring in more microtransit. I certainly tried that with a Cherry Creek to downtown thing before it went out of business, but I think there's other opportunities to bring some microtransit, which are 14-passenger vans that come every 10 minutes. I also think that we need to take ownership, Denver does, of its transit needs. RTD is a regional transportation system, and it has done a wonderful job to get people around through the region. But we need to take a look at what Denver's very specific needs are, being the largest city in the state, and take responsibility for finding better transit for us in the middle of the city so that I can at least get out of my car some of the time or have other opportunities than a car.
All right, thank you. Amanda?
Well, we absolutely are in a transportation desert, and it's not just District 5. It's the whole city. You know, RTD brings people to Denver, but if you don't want to go downtown, and there's no way to get around inside Denver, and that's proven. And the problem is that there's no dedicated funding source to be able to build out the things that we need. Protected bike lanes, sidewalks where they're appropriate, where there aren't any, public transit that is reliable, clean, safe, and takes us where we want to go. Right now, that doesn't exist in District 5, and it certainly doesn't exist in most of the rest of Denver either. But we can't do anything about that until there's the money for it. Right now, that comes from our annual fund, and that means it is strictly based on political will. We need to start looking at other sources of funding, like, for example, things like Uber and Lyft, that are private companies that are using our public right-of-ways for their own gain. Let's talk about some of the solutions. Let's look at a potential fee there. There are options here.
Thank you. And Steve?
I think this is a perfect place for the application of what's called common sense. So look inside yourselves and ask yourselves, what would it take for you to choose a mass transit alternative instead of hopping in your car every morning? Things like getting there fast, efficiently, low cost, those are the kinds of things that will pull you out of your cars and into a mass transit situation. And because we are a desert, I think one of the solutions is that if you take a look at most of the buses that are driving up and down Colorado Boulevard, let's say, they're 40 or 50 passenger buses. I rarely see more than 3 or 4 people in them, ever. Why not downsize those to the passenger vans that are smaller and allow them to go through and be collectors inside of our district so we have better access to the mass transit that's available to us? And at the same time, because it's RTD, Regional Transportation District, I think it involves the areas around Denver to come up with a solution that lowers the price.
All right, thank you. Our next question for our candidates, and we'll begin with Mary Beth Sussman. Last fall, a traffic circle was installed at 7th and Ash as a means of calming traffic. Do you think the circle has been effective? If so, how? And if not, would you back a proposal to CDOT to make the intersection a four-way stop?
Which intersection?
This is at 7th and Ash.
Oh, I know about where the traffic circle is. You know, there's a lot of traffic circle envy around. When people have seen that traffic circle from other neighborhoods, they ask, when can we get it? We have a neighbor here who lives on that street and is very excited about the traffic circle. I think these are wonderful inventions. It's a small little circle, right? You could put right in the middle of a neighborhood of a small intersection. You can still allow fire trucks to get past it, so it doesn't prevent the fire truck from being able to take a sharp right turn. We got one of 4 that are going to be in the city. I was very happy to be able to get one in my district. And they are studying it to see if it is effective. The neighbors tell me that it calms the traffic very well, and particularly people that are new to the intersection, because they go, what the heck is this thing? Trying to navigate around it, and so they slow down as they try to get around it. And I'm hoping that we can, first of all, establish that they are very successful in calming the traffic, and then put them in many more places in our city.
All right, thank you. Amanda.
Well, that traffic circle actually does a fantastic job of slowing the traffic. Mary Beth is right, for that particular block. But all it has really done is push the traffic to other blocks on the street. So the people who live on Ash Street, where that is located, absolutely love it. The people who live on, 3 blocks down, 2 blocks down on, Birch, hate it. Because all it has done is drive all of that traffic over to them. And there were no traffic studies in place before the city put that traffic circle in, so there's no comparison for the neighbors to say, this has made our lives worse. And that's a major problem. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about when I'm saying we need to bring the voice of the people back to the discussion. This is exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about.
Thank you. Steve?
Again, another great place for the application of common sense. Colorado Boulevard is like a big river, and when it fills up, as it does with traffic, what happens to a river? It overflows its banks. In a traffic context, that means that cars seek alternative routes to get to the same place faster and more efficiently. Therefore, I think it's not just a traffic circle, because indeed, if they can't negotiate down Ash at 40 miles an hour and make up for lost time, then they'll go to Birch or Belair or Claremont or Cherry, whatever they go to. So it's not just an application of a traffic circle. That is a symptom of an underlying disease. And I believe that even though the traffic circle is good, I think it slows traffic down on that intersection. What about the next blocks up? And how people will get used to the traffic circle and seek alternative routes to make up for lost time while they're trying to get through the intersections on Colorado Boulevard. So I think it's good, but we need more.
Thank you. Michelle?
So I was surprised when I ran into that traffic circle, because I've grown up there and all of a sudden there was a traffic circle and I was like, what happened? We need to remember that East Denver has some of the oldest neighborhoods in Denver, right? So we were built on a gridded system. And then we have a lot of in traffic that's coming off of the other streets, as everybody was saying. I will disagree with Amanda. I happen to know that the neighborhood association in that area worked very hard with Councilwoman Sussman and the surrounding neighbors, and that's what they came up with, because I criticized it and they corrected me. And I would have liked to have seen maybe dips or a speed bump so we could have kept the character of the neighborhood, because we never had roundabouts in the middle of our traditional neighborhoods. But I think it's a good idea, and we do have to slow the traffic down. I know coming off of Colfax through the alley, I'm nearly run down all the time because there is a lot of traffic on 14th and 13th and Colfax. People, it's already there, it's already happening. And so they do the cut-throughs, and we need to start slowing it down as well.
All right, thank you. Now, our final round of pre-submitted questions for our candidates, and we'll begin with Amanda. The question is, the nurses' dorm at the former Health Sciences campus at 9th and Colorado has been languishing for a decade, despite an agreement that it is to be preserved and reused. What will you do in the coming term, if elected, to encourage its designation and reactivation?
So I actually haven't been waiting to be elected in order to start advocating for these kinds of things. So I have reached out to Continuum Partners, who is building out 9th and Colorado, and I've asked them, what is their plan for what that looks like? I've reached out to Historic Denver, and I've asked them, what is is the nurses' dorm an actual historic location, and what is the information surrounding that? What does that look like? What are the requirements? So I've actually been educating myself and my neighborhood on what is going on there, and I will absolutely work with Continuum as a city council representative to come up with a solution for what that looks like. Because that's going to be a major part of the next build-out, along with the 17-story tower that is going in at 9th and, I believe, Bel Air.
All right, thank you. Steve?
I, too, have spoken with Continuum about that property, and I do know that, there is a need to resolve the issue, and they're too involved with the rest of the development to really focus on that now. And I will work as a councilman to move that project forward and obtain its historic designation and develop it in accordance with the way that needs to occur.
So I did not need to educate myself. I'm familiar with the nurses' dorm. I'm familiar with University Hospital and the history there. Continuum Partners, as I spoke with them, they had made an agreement to preserve that nurses' dorm. It hasn't happened. We need, and I have been talking to getting historic designation on there because there's not. And that's the last bit of history for University Hospital where liver and kidney transplant pioneered in 1963, which my grandmother was part of that team. So I know what's there, and I know what has been lost, and I talk continuously about how do we do this, how do we get the historic designation. My family worked to save the Anderson house that was once owned in our family and was Alfred Packard's attorney, and it was torn down, and it was the only Queen Anne style house in the entire city and county of Denver. We're losing our history, and that's something that I'm very passionate about, but I didn't need to educate myself on it. I already knew. And we also need to be concerned about the VA hospital, and I think because they're going to fully move out to Aurora, and that's going to be starting to redevelop, and I think there's a way to tie that into housing, the nurses' dorm into housing.
Thank you. Now, Mary Beth?
Yeah, it was a shame. We had a psychiatric hospital, Carla will know this, that was even more beautiful than the nurses' dorm that they did take down. I would work very hard to keep it as a historic place. I know that Continuum is very interested in the reuse of it and the adaptive reuse of it. And it was very important to the neighborhood when we were thinking about how we wanted to have that project look, was to preserve the neighborhood, the nurses' dorm. I actually went to a 50-year reunion with the nurses who graduated from there, and there's a tunnel. There were tunnels all the way under all that property, and they were able to go from their dorm to their classrooms and everything. So it's an important piece, and they are preserving the lawn in front of it. In fact, the project has about 3 or 4 parks on it, but they're preserving the lawn in front of it as a park, and I think it's very important that we preserve it. To keep it just as a memory of the University Hospital, which was there for so many years and meant so much to so many people.
All right, thank you. Now we get to do something really fun called the lightning round, in which our candidates will be asked to answer several short questions with a simple yes, no, or pass. Again, yes, no, or pass. No explaining and no expanding. We'll return to ballot order and begin with Michelle Fry and go on down the ballot order. Remember, your answer can only be yes, no, or pass. All right, first question. In the last 30 days, have you used mass transit, a bike, or walked for business purposes to get to work?
Yes.
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 Next question, beginning again with Michelle. Do you or any family member own a licensed firearm?
Oh, no.
Yes.
No.
I own an antique one. Does that
Yes.
count? Oh, it's-
Next question. If elected or re-elected, will you introduce an ordinance barring fracking in Denver?
Absolutely.
Yes, completely.
I was the first candidate in District 5 to sign
Yes
on
or
to
no?
that. Yes.
Yes.
Have you ever attended the National Western Stock Show?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Should Larimer Square undergo major remodeling to allow for new high-rises and the possible demolition of some of the historic buildings?
No.
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 No. Easy.
Have you ever missed the opportunity to vote in a local, regional, or national election?
No.
No.
No. I don't think.
No.
Do you own season tickets for any of Denver's major sports teams?
No.
Can you repeat the question?
Do you own season tickets for any of Denver's major sports teams?
No.
No.
Used to. No.
Do you support the Turn Over a New Leaf program, which is a new effort to expunge low-level marijuana convictions that occurred in Denver before recreational marijuana was legalized in Colorado?
Absolutely.
Yes.
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 Do you get your news from a traditional newspaper, that is, one printed on paper?
Yes.
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 Should the city promote the use of taxpayer money to put a dome on Mile High Stadium in order to attract the Super Bowl or other big sports events to Denver?
No.
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 All right, moving on. Now, this round is going to be the candidates' turn to ask questions of one another. Each of you will select one of your opponents and ask them a question, and hopefully they'll have an answer for you. We will go in the ballot order again. So, Ms. Fry, you may ask one of your opponents a question, and if one of you are chosen, you get 1 minute to answer. Okay, so, Michelle.
So, Amanda, I would like to know why you did not support 2E, which, which brought campaign finance reform to the city and county of Denver.
Absolutely. And that's actually a great question. So if you look at, let's take, for example, this election, there are 60 candidates. So assuming 50 of those candidates elect to take public money, and they raise $10,000 each, that's $500,000, right? Well, 2E would allow 9 times that to be given to these candidates, which is $4.5 million of city money, our taxpayer dollars, that would be going to fund candidates. It's candidate welfare. It doesn't make any sense. I think there are other ways that 2E could have been written that would have done that same job and included more people in the community to be able to run in a different way that did not spend our taxpayer dollars to do it.
All right, thank you. Steve, your turn to ask an opponent a question.
Mary Beth, what are your thoughts about requiring each development to include a certain amount of low-income units regardless of location?
Actually, we do have a linkage fee for every single development that they have to pay into or build units. So in a way, we already have that rule that you must provide support for affordable developments.
Okay. Amanda Sawyer, your turn to ask an opponent a question.
Mary Beth, families in Winston Downs have been asking for a crosswalk at Newport and Alameda since 2012 so that their children can get to school safely. In your opinion, what is the appropriate amount of time it should take a council member to deliver a result on something like this?
I've been working with the school there in the neighborhood for quite, as soon as they called and asked me to do this. And I, last fall, got a promise from Public Works that they would put in not only a crosswalk there, but a signalized crosswalk change the laneage that is there to help the students that get across there. I have since learned that the dollars for that may not be in the budget, and I have pounded my fist on the table and said, and produced the notes from the previous Public Works individual saying that was in the budget, and I want to make sure that it is still in the budget so we can get that thing done this year.
All right, thank you. And now, Mary Beth, your turn to ask a question of an opponent.
I'd like to ask Amanda, many of the small businesses on East Colfax are worried about their survival. I was wondering how you might bring about good sustainable development there.
That's a great question, and I think, the Colfax Business Improvement District does a really good job of partnering with the community and the government to bring about those changes. They have got a plan in place that has so much potential, and like I said, Colfax is such a fantastic opportunity for our city and for change. And so I really think that what makes sense there is to partner with the experts who know that area, who know those businesses, who own those businesses, and see what they want and what they need in our support in order to be able to help them succeed.
All right. And now for another one-on-one round. Candidates, once again, you'll be able to choose one of your opponents, and if you answer, you get 1 minute to answer. So we'll begin in reverse ballot order. So Mary Beth Sussman, as before, you can ask one of your opponents a question.
Michelle, I know you spend a lot of time at the state legislature. Yeah. Tell me what you think the difference between what a state legislator does versus what a city council person does, how the role is different.
I see the roles between a city council person and a state legislator as the same. I see that the state operates in a executive, legislative, and judicial branch. I see that the city is supposed to operate in an executive, legislative, and judicial branch. The city council is a legislative body, just as the state legislature is a legislative body. However, the legislature deals with issues of statewide concern. The municipality deals with life issues that impact our daily living. However, there's a crossover, as we see with the local minimum wage option, and which is HB 1912, which would give municipalities the ability to set their local minimum wage. So the city and county of Denver could set their local minimum wage according to cost of living, instead of it being a statewide concern. What's good in Conejos County is not good for Denver as far as a minimum wage. So I see that there are similarities and crossover.
Thank you. And Amanda, your turn to ask an opponent a question.
Steve, you've stated in previous forums that if elected, you would institute a 2-year moratorium on development in Denver. How would you manage the resulting economic loss to employees, businesses, and taxpayers during that moratorium?
Well, the issue is that at the moment, development is runaway, as I see it. And it happens so fast and without a lot of forethought that I want to see what happens when the buildings that are already being constructed are absorbed into the system. So the resulting losses probably would come to construction companies primarily, because they wouldn't have follow-on projects over and over again. I don't know what the downturn economic ramifications are. The streets would be less congested until such time as new development started. I think it's a brilliant idea, if I say so myself. I think development is just too fast without thinking.
All right. Now, Steve, it's your turn to ask someone a question.
Okay. Mary Beth, what can we do about Quebec Street to resolve the incredible traffic mess that's about to occur when the project that's in Lowry 1 is completed with 347 units, dumping more traffic onto Quebec?
City's been studying Quebec for years, and finally got some money to. The whole neighborhood had decided that they would want 4 lanes, 2 lanes going both ways, sidewalks, and some light change timing. And they got $23 million from the federal government to do this. Then when the city went and started looking at the amount of property they would have to purchase, because they weren't going to do eminent domain, they found that $23 million wasn't enough. So they're going back to the neighborhoods to see exactly, we all are, we're going back to the neighborhoods to see what they would like us to do. We could still do the 2 lanes on either side, but it would be many, 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 many years before we'd be able to do that. Or do we want to just make the street as friendly as it can be and build those sidewalks and make better bus stops so that people feel safer when they're walking on it?
Time, thank you.
I had another really good idea.
I know, don't have enough time. That brings us to Michelle. You may ask an opponent a question.
Sure. So Steve, what are your ideas for workforce development, especially since we have a large population of youth at GW? George Washington High School, sorry,
By workforce development, you're talking about
for the youth.
for the youth. I actually have had a thought that what the city needs to do is to develop, using private funds, the equivalent of a venture capital pool that will, at a very low level, finance good ideas throughout the city, starting at the student level and probably going up in age, because really it's the employment base here that's going to keep the millennials, the current millennials, in Denver as they age and they couple up and they move to the suburbs. So I think if we don't focus on continuing to increase our employment base, we've got a big problem coming at us. And I think that the way to do it is, in some way or another, to have the city and ultimately the region foster entrepreneurialism. It's the single best way to keep what makes this country great, great, small business.
All right, now we're moving on to the closing statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute for a closing statement, and we'll reverse the order of the opening statements, which means we'll begin with Mary Beth Sussman.
Oh, thank you very much. I think it's very important to me that we really pay attention to the mobility needs that we have, particularly in our district. And we really need to work on the congestion of our cars, and so it's something that I've sort of dedicated my life to. And I'm hoping very much that we can create the first Denver Department of Mobility and take control of our destiny and try to make our communities much more walkable, much more bikeable, and that we also create communities where everyone can enjoy an affordable living condition in all around the city. And I look forward to being able to serve while I work on these things, and I ask for your vote. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Amanda Sawyer.
Thank you very much for your time and for coming out tonight. It's fantastic to see such a great group of people here who are interested in our community, and it's what really inspires me. This is what drove me to run in the first place, was to be your voice on City Council and to really engage our community in these conversations. Denver is at a point in time where we have some big, tough discussions that we need to make that we don't know. You know, we need to decide who we want to be, and these are not easy discussions, and there are no easy answers here. And so I look forward to being your representative on City Council, bringing you back into this process and working collaboratively with you and with the city to be able to move forward so that Denver is a fantastic place for all of our families to live moving forward. I ask for your vote on May 7th. Again, Amanda Sawyer, thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, a closing statement from Steve Riplin.
I think one of the strengths I bring to this contest is the fact that I am not in the government currently, and I can bring fresh eyeballs to the problems and the solutions. I actually come as the result of being a lawyer and a CPA and a business coach from a world of problem solving, and not from the land of committees and meetings and budgets and studies and escrows and all of the things that, you know, invade a typical governmental entity. My clients have problems, they need solutions now. It's not about doing a study. My experience and my background allow me the luxury of adding substantial creativity to the process of looking for solutions. I bring a new and fresh outlook to assessing situations and finding the right way to solve the problems. Do we want runaway development without any common sense, or do we want thoughtful growth that considers the intended and unintended consequences? Once a building is built, you cannot unbuild it. There's no process to de-densify the city once buildings have been done. Steve Replin, please
Thank you.
vote for me.
And finally, with her closing statement, is Michelle Fry.
Thanks, Tamara. Thank you, everyone, for spending some time with us this evening. I'm running again to bring government back to the community first. I see that there is a lack of transparency and accountability. We see that a micro Target was built on the 16th Street Mall, and we gave Target $4 million. $2 million went to Target, who turns a profit quarterly, and $2 million went to the developer. Why? We have a housing crisis. We talk about we put $30 million into the Housing First Fund. That's not enough. We have a lot of corporate and developer welfare, and there's not transparency in it. We have a large senior population, a large aged and aging population in our district. They are being pushed out, along with middle income, low income families. They are finding it hard to make ends meet. Seniors are making the tough choices between paying their property taxes and buying necessary medication. I have worked in the government. I have worked in corporate America. I have worked in sports marketing. I have a Stanley Cup ring. I bring a broad breadth of expertise to this position. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's the audience's turn. Let's give our candidates a big round of applause for their efforts. Thank you so much for being here. Our thanks also to Denver Decides partners, which include Interneighborhood Cooperation, the League of Women Voters of Denver, and Historic Denver. Denver Decides is presented by Denver 8 TV. We hope we've given you a fair look at each candidate vying to represent those who live in District 5. For complete election information, go online to denverdecides.com. I'm Tamara Banks. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you again next time.